All right. Welcome to Making Music. Well, today we have the fabulous Doug Doppler. Thank you.
Hi.
And you're a Favored Nations recording artist. Now tell me about this.
Favored Nations is a, if you will, a boutique record label, and it's owned and operated by a guy named Steve Vai, famous guitar player. And really the vision of the label was to create an environment where instrumental guitar players and people who really were not traditional recording artists, in other words, you're not going to find Madonna there. You're going to find guys like Eric Johnson. You're going to find other players like Andy Timmons, players like myself, who really their main artistic statement is made through the guitar. It's largely a guitar label, but not exclusively.
Okay, cool. Cool. Now you also endorse Ibanez guitars.
I do endorse Ibanez guitars.
And I see you're playing Guitar Showcase. We love Ibanez, and we sell a lot of them. And but today you've brought with you. We're going to do a two-part show here. We're going to do one today and one next week through the magic of television. And you've brought with you today some very unique vintage Ibanez. Now, a lot of people don't understand that Ibanez kind of started out as a sort of a copycat kind of a situation, okay? And that one that you're playing looks an awful lot like a Fender Stratocaster. The headstock, everything. Now, he's looking tight with the bullet truss rod. And tell me about this guitar. How did you get started collecting Ibanez vintage reissue type guitars?
That's an interesting question. And how I started playing Ibanez guitars in and of itself was kind of a music business, kind of a strange little twisted road to start off with. I had a student named Ethan, brilliant guitar player. He's off at UCLA doing some film degree or something now. And he had this beautiful ESP 58 reissue that was just a guitar. Really fun instrument. And so he loaned that to me, and then I loaned him another instrument, and one of the instruments got stolen out of the back of a car. Don't leave your instruments in the back of a car, by the way.
No.
Bad move, bad move. So what ended up happening was he ended up giving me this Ibanez guitar. It's actually not, it's not here today, but it's actually being fixed up for some stuff I'm getting ready to do for some Ibanez clinics.
Cool.
So the thing is, that was my first Ibanez guitar, at least kind of in the modern generation of things, the S series, which is the main series of guitars that I play professionally. And kind of along the way, I discovered all these beautiful vintage Ibanez guitars back when I was in high school, which was, of course, not that long ago. But if you could imagine, it was a long time ago. There were people that actually were playing these guitars that had them new and had had them for a couple of years at that point. And Ibanez really made its name initially as a company that actually manufactured these beautiful, if you will, copycat instruments. And they were extremely well made. There was a lot of eye for detail with these instruments. In fact, part of the problem was the detail was a little too good. Companies like Fender and Gibson decided to start suing them because they were encroaching on their copyrights and their trademarks. Mm-hmm. So, about this guitar?
Yeah.
This guitar, as you pointed out, it's actually kind of wrong. And, as you kind of begin to find out about vintage instruments and whatnot, you begin to notice some particular things. This is a two-tone sunburst. And that's more indicative of an early 50s Strat. And it's got a maple neck, which implies it's got a maple fingerboard on a maple neck. But it's got this thing here, which is called, and it's something that Fender didn't introduce until, what, the late 70s, 78?
Actually, it was mid to late 70s.
Mid to late 70s. So the point being is like, they got everything right on the guitar except for the bullet. And it probably would have only had one string retainer, is that correct?
Yeah.
These are called string retainers, by the way, because they retain the strings. Now, one of the things that we've been talking about here collectively is kind of when you have a vintage instrument, what you want to do is you want to try and keep it vintage. And so I would like to go over kind of the things that make a guitar vintage. The pickup, first things that people replace, and we've got actually a shot that we've got for you of this guitar case down here. And in there you can actually see the original pickups from this guitar that I've pulled out and replaced with a set of DiMarzios. And yes, gentlemen, I am in fact endorsed by DiMarzio.
Yes, you
am. So the thing is that as I put these pickups in here, I made sure that I would keep the original pickups, and I try and keep them in the actual case that they came in, such that the guitar and the pickups and the case are all kind of married together.
Very important.
Very important.
Here's a shot of that. Original pickups in there with the wires, and you were as careful as possible to make sure that you didn't damage them. So if a vintage collector wants to restore this to absolute originality, they can go back and do it. Now, I might add the same thing would apply to tuners, knobs, potentiometers, backplate if you had it, if it ever had one. all of those things.
Absolutely. And as I particularly look at an instrument as I want to buy it, all the things you just mentioned, in particular things that I want to know about. Does it have the original backplate? Obviously, that's long since gone.
That's gone.
Does it have the original tuners? On this particular instrument, they've been rephotos. They're fine tuners. They literally are fine tuners.
Yes.
But the point being is that these aren't the original tuners that came on the instrument. And it's one of the things that if you were going to kind of make a list of what makes a guitar a 10 or not, this would be one of the things that would actually give you a pretty serious mark off. Because quite often when you repair, you're actually going to have to re-drill the headstock, and that's bad. So
they could alter it, and those tuners, I might add, on a vintage Fender are upwards of $2,000 now.
Yes. So
just for those old tuning keys.
And the sad irony on that topic is there are actually a lot of people who actually vintage Fenders. And you got to understand it as a vintage collector. The guitar and its parts are meant to be kept together. It's kind of, if you imagine, when you're dead, you don't really want people chopping your fingers off. People can use various other body parts. The point being is I don't want my fingers chopped off and sent somewhere. It's the equivalent of doing that to a vintage instrument. It's meant to be kept together. And so the thing is that what's happening is there's a huge market now where people are taking these vintage instruments or ones that aren't necessarily perfect and they're just parting them out, which is really, in my mind, pretty.
It's a sad thing, and I might also add that a lot of people do that because they buy those parts and put them on frauds, fakes, and where you might have the body's not real. What was the term you used? Body's not real, neck's not real, tuners aren't real.
Yeah, that's right.
Pickups have been changed, but other than that, it's
yeah, so by the time that you've replaced everything except for the strings, it's an original guitar. And actually, the thing is that I actually have bought a certain number of these instruments on the internet. And, I'm a pretty experienced collector. I know what it is that I'm looking for. But one of the things we're going to do today is we're going to kind of go through some of the guitars that I ended up getting that weren't quite as they were presented to be. So it's actually, one of the cool things about actually having a store like Guitar Showcase is you have the opportunity to deal with people that actually have a lot of expertise in instruments. And in particular, one of the things in the music business that happens is quite often people will bring in a vintage instrument and they won't necessarily know what they've got. And they've actually got a pretty cool policy where they have this 3-tiered vintage layaway consignment.
Right. We tell them what it would be if we kept it for a year or so on consignment, and they got top market dollar, which might be $20,000, and then 6 months. If it were to sell within that period of time, it might be 15. And if they wanted cash today or to sell at wholesale, it might only be 10,000. No event do we ever say, "Oh, that's just an old guitar; it's worth a couple $100. That one you found under your bed. Don't worry about it." We never do that, and that's just part of our code of ethics at Guitar Showcase. The other thing that we do is we're very happy to show people how much it's worth at no charge. In other words, we do free appraisals.
It's good.
For insurance purposes, a lot of times people need that.
Yep.
So we do that.
And you're actually one of the very few businesses that actually will give somebody a fair market value
Absolutely.
for one of those instruments. It's actually, so you're not in the know, it's actually something that's very rare in this business.
People tend to take advantage of the people who don't know, and
yes.
And we, I will say that a lot of people are more educated now with the internet, and I think it's helped in a lot of ways. There's a lot of misinformation out there, as you well know. Now tell me, how long have you been? You've been an Ibanez endorsee for 10 years?
Just over 10 years.